Welcome to Hear Here, the podcast where you get a VIP behind-the-scenes look at the broad collective of music venues and festivals that make Buffalo the music destination it is. Today, we're talking about the Buffalo AKG Art Museum. And in this episode, we'll explore how an art space can be the perfect complement to live music. Buffalo AKG holds an annual Art of Jazz series, the new Thursday Night Live series, and several other live music offerings throughout the year. To tell us about the connection between the museum and live music, we welcome Andrew Mayer, Manager of Marketing and Media Relations at Buffalo AKG Art Museum. Andrew, you have so many things going on here at the Buffalo AKG.
Yes.
Obviously, a world-renowned art museum just went through a big renovation project, getting attention for the architecture. You have a music series. You've had a history of music here at the AKG. Why is music so important to the museum?
The first thing that comes to mind, I think, is it creates a really good entry point for people that don't consider themselves art people. Mm-hmm. And so I think with music, oftentimes, it's such a more approachable art forms. I think with a lot of people, you don't have to be a trained musician to have an opinion on what kind of music that you like. So I think for a lot of people, it just kind of creates an entry point to the museum. It gets them into the gallery space, spend some time with the artworks before a show, and you never know. Some people come away from an interaction with an artwork thinking completely different about the art museum.
And you have multiple spaces here, obviously,
Correct.
where we're sitting right now, which is the home of Art of Jazz.
We are currently sitting here in the Stanford and Judith Lipsey Auditorium within the Seymour H. Knox building. We also have the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Town Square, which is a free space year-round, and that's where we have Thursday Night Live every Thursday night.
And that's where the big, beautiful tree architecture
Correct.
is. Mm-hmm.
It's called Common Sky.
Yeah. And then you've obviously the Rockin' at the AKG returned this past year.
Exciting.
It was on the
we
front
had
lawn.
Krishnan.
Yeah, that was a big get.
We had about, I think, between 5,500 and 6,000 people on the Great Lawn. We also had a BPO concert in July of 2023. We had about 6,000 people on the Great Lawn as well. So, between the Great Lawn and the Town Square, we have these really great civic spaces to program now.
Yeah. And music is also a part of the history of the museum. What are some of the highlights of the past?
Speaking about the Art of Jazz series, the Art of Jazz series started in 1999, really kind of with the simple idea of pairing the world-class collection of artwork that we have here at the museum with world-class jazz musicians. And here we are, 26 years later?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty successful series.
And then you obviously have had Rockin' at the AKG, and other series also in the history.
Yeah, we do Rockin' at the Knox once a year. We also do the Lipsey Summer Jazz on the back steps out by the Hoyt Lake side of the campus. Like I said, we do Thursday Night Live every Thursday from 5:30 to 7:30. But then, a lot of times for First Fridays, the first Friday of every month, we'll have, a small musical acts set up on the sculpture terrace in the new Gunlock building. So we really try and make it an environment where you could kind of have an interaction with a musical act unexpectedly during a First Friday.
Oh, yeah. And there are a variety of musical acts that perform Thursday nights and Fridays. So you do get a glimpse into the Buffalo music scene as a whole.
I love that about that series. I love live music. And so to be able to see such a wide swath of genres week to week, I think is my favorite part about that series.
Yeah.
You just never know what you're going to see.
What are some specific features or things on the campus that if you've had musicians comment on or fans comment on why they like the spaces?
So the auditorium specifically, I think for an evening show with the curtains pulled back, you've got some of the street lights in the park and the trees within the Delaware Park. I think it creates a really beautiful environment, especially for something like a jazz show. Like I said, we've also found that the Great Lawn is a really great public civic space to have a big concert and have thousands of people out on the campus. And then, the sculpture terrace up in the new Gunlock building is just nice because it allows you to look out into the park and see all of the, interactions that are happening outside while you're also seeing what's going on inside.
Why was it important to keep the Art of Jazz here and have it still be a part of AKG over all of these years?
Like I said, I think any sort of musical program that we do is just another access point for people in our community and outside of our community. So I think, we've done chamber music, we've done the art of jazz, we do, Thursday Night Live. So we're always kind of looking for ways to get people in the door that might not consider themselves an art person.
Yeah. Has there been a performance or three over the years where you said, wow, this is a great experience?
Beck is a personal favorite of mine.
Yeah.
I'm just I've been listening to Beck my whole life, so to be able to see him live was really great. But I would say from a staff perspective, the Rock-ins are the ones that really stand out, because you're just here all day and kind of excited to yourself see the act.
I remember being part of a practice session with Beck and before Rockin' at the Rockin' at the Knox then, and it was just kind of wild. Like him and his band were just in one of the rooms in the museum in like a back corner practicing. So that was a pretty cool moment. And you do seem to pay attention to the full experience here. I know like the VIP area for Rockin' is like one of the best at anything in the city. Has Art of Jazz and doing that here opened up other ideas or opportunities for some of the other series? Do you get an overlap?
I think that you get an overlap somewhat in performers between the Art of Jazz series and the Lipsey Summer Jazz series. But then, like the people that you talk to today, you get people that maybe come and visit one type of musical performance, and then they're inclined to figure out what other musical performances we offer. And then you get someone that's kind of in the ecosystem a little bit more and, is checking our website and following us on social media and becoming a member to kind of, be aware of everything that we're doing.
Do you think the backdrop and the architecture and obviously the beautiful views adds to the performances? And have you had people comment on that or come back?
We hear, I think, the majority of those comments from the actual performers themselves. I think the auditorium that we're sitting in now is relatively small. I think it's a max at 358. So it's a relatively small venue. And like I said, for an evening show, you've got kind of like the street lights out in the park, and you've got these curtains pulled back, and you can kind of see Delaware Park as you're also watching the musical performance. So it's a kind of a magical space to watch a show.
Yeah. And I mean, we've been talking to, during this series, venues and, festivals, and Buffalo is becoming more of a music destination.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
It's pretty great. How does the AKG fit into that?
Well, personally, I'm excited about that. It's nice to, I would say that is, I would think, most reflected in the booking process, because at a couple of years ago, we would be a stop in between Toronto and Pittsburgh, so to speak. So we would get acts that'd be like, we'll come to play in Buffalo on a Monday or a Tuesday, like in between these two shows that we already have set up. And so now I think that we're finding Buffalo has become more of a weekend show destination where musical acts are saying, we have to make a stop there. And sometimes they're doing multiple shows here, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
So somebody walking into the museum, maybe coming here for a musical performance, how would you explain the whole experience of being here?
I think that it just fits so well to be able to spend some time in the galleries, kind of interact with some of these world-class artworks, and then come into a space like this and see a world-class musician.
Yeah.
It just works.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky to have the AKG. We're lucky to have you, behind the scenes making this all work. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
talking to us today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
See you at a show.
Heck yeah.
When you think of jazz in Buffalo, there is a rich history of musicians that come to mind. On this episode of Hear Here, I was able to sit down with jazz great George Caldwell for an incredible conversation about jazz and his connection to the AKG. George, I'm so honored to just be in your presence, so thank you for taking the time with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
There are so many places we could start with you. Your Buffalo Music Hall of Fame career, performing with Duke Ellington. There are a lot of things we could talk about. Yeah. Let's start at the beginning. What got you into music and into jazz?
My dad, pretty much. My dad was a kind of a Renaissance guy. He taught physics, chemistry, and math, and in the college level. But he also was a musician. But I grew up with it all, so I kind of grew up with a love of music.
Yeah.
period. Yeah. When I was growing up, besides piano lessons and being in school and all that stuff, when I got interested, I first started studying classical music. I took classical lessons, but when I got interested in jazz, my dad loved jazz, as with everything. So we listened to Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and Chopin and Duke and Count Basie and Artie Shaw. Those were my dad's top three guys. And I just never thought I could do it. I could play it. It never crossed my mind, but I dropped out of school and worked for about 5 years. And then I finally went back to school at Oberlin. And my mentor there, I met him, and then he said, "Come by my studio." And he said, "Do you ever think about playing jazz?" He said, "You take my course, and I'll have you playing in 6 months." And that was like throwing water, a life preserver to a drowning man, because that's something I really wanted to do. I actually discovered I could actually play jazz piano, which was just like, I couldn't believe it, So I was off and running, and yeah.
Well, so then what brought you to Buffalo?
Well, I did a show at Studio Arena, the old Studio Arena on Main Street. And I met the woman who is now my wife. She was doing the publicity, marketing stuff for Studio Arena. And we got to know each other. And we ended up.
A tale as old as time. I'm very grateful for your wife that now we get to have you in Buffalo.
Yeah, well, I am too, because this is a great place to live. Mm-hmm. Buffalo, I had no idea.
Yeah, and how would you explain the jazz scene here from when you got here to now?
Well, when I got here, there was a few places to play that I knew of. There was Bobby McGee's over on Main Street across from the South Campus of UB, and there was the Elmwood Lounge down what's the cross street there? Utica. Yep. Elmwood and Utica, and there was a place out on Maple and Sweet Home Road. It was called, it used to be called the Dakota before I got here, and then it had been closed for a while. And the guy from Bobby McGee's closed that little place. It was a small dive, but it had a great jam session, and that's how I met a lot of the musicians here.
You've performed as part of Art of Jazz, and you've performed here, you've performed at all the places you've mentioned. Yeah. And then you've performed here at the AKG, which is a world-renowned art museum. Yes, how does it feel to perform on this stage or in this building with this mixture with the art in the building and the backdrop of Buffalo?
I'll put it this way. This is a world-class art museum, and there's works of art from around the world, and it's taken very seriously as an art. Yes. Installation here as a place where great art goes through here. And so it immediately elevates whatever is associated with it. Like people come here and play and from around, like in the Art of Jazz series, from around the world. Yeah. They come from everywhere. And I've been fortunate enough to play with some of them, like Camille Thurman, tenor player and vocalist. Oh boy.
There was an impressive lineup with Art of Jazz.
Yeah. I can't think of everybody, but because I'm on the spot right now.
Well, and you performed a lot, so I understand that. It's like when we ask people to pick their favorite performances, when you've had so many great experiences, it's really hard to nail it down.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, performing with Camille was a peak performance. Well, a peak time. It was great, and performing at Pausa. Yeah. When I remember when we first started, we have a band that performs there. It's called Star People. Well, and it's not like we're stars, but we were Miles Davis. We played Miles Davis associated compositions, his and people who were in his band, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, those guys.
There's such an impressive repertoire of artists that have performed as part of Art of Jazz, and it is here in Buffalo. So there might be people from outside the area. You've lived a lot of places that may not know about it, but also Buffalo has become a music destination.
Yeah.
What would you say to people in the jazz community or people that are just interested in listening to jazz about the scene here in Buffalo and seeing shows?
The scene here it's very eclectic. There's a lot of different types of music here. I mean, from all genres of music. Buffalo is the cultural scene here was a big, pleasant shock. I had no idea. Of course, I'd only come through Buffalo and performed come one night, and then you're out the next morning. So I had no idea. And so we at places like this, there's international and national artists. There's Pausa Art House. There's there's Sportsman's, which also has jazz, because I played there. In fact, that's another peak performance place.
Really? Yeah. As part of this series, we did an episode on Pausa and on Sportsman's.
Oh, yeah.
And so Sportsman's was one of your peak performances?
Yeah. Well, when my wife and I were sparking, as they say, I used to drive up here from New York City. I was living in the city for about 30 years anyway. So when the first time I came up to see her, she was like, I was like, is there any place around here where I could practice? And she said she thought about it for about 2 minutes, and she was like, "Oh, I'll just call Dwayne Hall because and I, over at Sportsman."
Yeah.
And he used to let me practice on that grand piano in the old studio right next door to Sports. I don't know if you knew about that. It's like, that's like a building that's right next to it.
I mean, what do you think is going to be the key of encouraging jazz musicians, up-and-coming musicians, and keeping the jazz scene alive here in Buffalo?
Jazz series like we have here, and the jazz series over at the Birchfield, the John Coltrane birthday celebration. Music is art, the jazz artists that they bring in. That has to be continued, and there has to be a way for these youngsters to come and see that. Jazz has to be in the curriculum in the schools. It has to continue, and we have to expose the youngsters, the up and coming, to what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons that I'm out at UB. I mean, I never intended to teach. I wanted to, because I was so gung-ho on it. I just wanted to play, and I wanted to spread the word,
Mm-hmm.
So I figured now I'm older, and I've done a lot of touring around the world for years, and so I should give back. I should help somebody else.
We're so grateful to have you in Buffalo. You're such a treasure. So, I mean, we could probably do a full documentary on you alone and your career. So,
oh my goodness.
I can't wait to talk to you more and to see you more at jazz performances. And Art of Jazz is lucky to have you. The AKG is lucky to have you. So, thank you for spending time with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. I hope I helped out in some way.
I think you have.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. I could have talked to George for hours, but waiting in the wings were two superfans and jazz enthusiasts, Krishnan Kartha and Jack Nossavage. They each bring a different perspective of the audience experience. Krish, I'm so excited to talk to you today as a music fan in general, but also as a fan of the AKG. You've seen a lot of shows here, both for the Art of Jazz and the new Thursday night series, right?
That's correct. Well, of course, I came as a kid. But then I lived in New York City for 16 years, moved back in 99, and soon after moving back, became a member at the gallery. And started going to the Art of Jazz pretty soon after it started.
Yeah. So what draws you into seeing performances here? You came here, obviously, for the museum, but then ended up seeing musical performances here.
Yeah, well, I'm a fan of both, art and music. And for instance, this Thursday night series, it's a perfect opportunity. I can walk here from home. So this past Thursday, I walked around, saw a couple of the exhibits I hadn't seen yet, and then went down, got my dinner and drink, and watched the music. It's like a very nice evening.
A whole package.
Yeah.
As far as the art of jazz, if you've been coming here, I mean, it's been a part of this landscape for a long time now.
The music and art of jazz, it's kind of like the museum. It has to be well curated, and
Yeah.
it always has been. Bruce Eaton did it first, and then Tony Zambito, and the acts they bring in are incredible. I mean, I think people are not aware of it if they're not jazz fans, but these are the best acts in the world. And I think if you actually went through the roster of who's played here and added up the number of Grammys and downbeat jazz polls they've won, it would be incredible. And there's not a whole, UB does some, Kleinhans does some, Buff State does some, but really on a yearly basis, nobody consistently does it like the art of jazz has been bringing in acts.
That's a really great point. Over all the years you've been attending, have there been specific performances that reminded you of how special this series can be?
Well, there have been a lot of great performances, lots of great shows, but a couple do come to mind. The jazz trio, the Bad Plus, which is really cutting edge when they played here. I don't know how many people here knew them. I had been listening to them already, but that's an act that, it was a great show. So yeah, having acts of that caliber come in consistently is huge. I think Paus is a gem. It's a beautiful, intimate place that respects jazz, but for a national act that can fill an auditorium like this, we don't really have a jazz club that does that consistently. I've got hopes for the Colored Musicians Club when it reopens. But
Yeah. So you also are watching local musicians downstairs,
Yes.
and you've seen quite a few shows because Andrew has seen your face there, so that's why he said you have to talk to this guy.
Yeah. Well, this is obvious. It's a fairly new series. Since the museum reopened.
Yeah.
And it's really taking advantage of that beautiful courtyard they have.
Yeah.
So it's been really nice. They had, it's obviously a variety of music, which is a good thing. You want to bring in different audiences, and I'll listen to almost any kind of music, so it's fine with me. I think a lot of people who come don't realize they can get some great food and drinks, so they don't come realizing that. They may even eat first and miss some of the show because they don't realize. So that's nice.
The AKG, obviously world-renowned, has gotten a lot of attention over the rebuilds and the architecture. How do you think that helps with the Buffalo music scene doing music here and draws people maybe from outside the area?
If you have the time, the perfect thing to do is go see the gallery and then see the music.
Yeah.
That works out great. I mean, I love that mixture of trying to mix jazz and music, If you think, the art of jazz has been in this auditorium. The Thursday night series is out in the courtyard, but they've had music all over the place. I remember way back when Rockin' at the Knox was indoors.
Yeah.
And I was always like, how can they do this? How can they have all these people with their drinks and bands in all this great art? I don't think, if I was the insurer, I'm not sure I'd let them do that. But it was cool.
Well, I'm glad that we got to talk to you because of your knowledge of the whole music scene here at the AKG, even though it was funny, Andrew saw you at the Thursday night series.
Kind of rando, yeah.
And then once he got talking to you, he realized you're a connoisseur of the music here at AKG. So, well, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Pleasure.
And I look forward to seeing you at future shows here at AKG. Thank you. Jack, you've been identified as a big a jazz fan, but a fan of the programming here at the AKG Art of Jazz, obviously.
Absolutely.
In that. How many performances do you think that you've seen here?
At this point, I couldn't count them. I mean, between what goes on in this auditorium or any of the other spaces here, the back steps.
Yeah.
I mean, the steps are a big one, especially for local musicians. I mean, that's a huge thing that, luckily Don Metz has been the curator of the Lipsey series out there for I don't know how many years now. And he always goes above and beyond to take care of the local musicians. And that's something I really appreciate.
Yeah. And, obviously the AKG is a destination spot. It's a world-renowned art museum. it's gotten a lot of attention with the renovation. Maybe some people don't always think that, oh, that's going to also be a music destination.
Yes.
So how would you explain it to people outside the area?
Well, I think whether it's whether you're here for the art or the music, it is, especially with the renovations that they've undergone in the last few years, it's a very immersive experience. I mean, you are literally in the middle of it. Especially on, I know, Thursday nights, they have a concert series down in the atrium, and that's I mean, you are in the thick of it. There's no, no experience like that.
How has the backdrop of this venue, how is that as a jazz fan with that immersive experience for you, especially with art of jazz?
Well, I think they go hand in hand. I mean, really, especially when you look at it, the majority of the actual physical art that's here, whether that be like the Clifford Still collection, which, I mean, for me, that you couldn't get any more, mid-century modern, swinging than that. For me, part of the appreciation is that, the AKG has been such a long-standing jazz venue.
Mm-hmm.
Going back at this point, 50 plus years, in the 1970s, you had the late great Phil DeRay was a saxophone player here. And he was the one that did the first performances on the back steps with a group called the Buffalo Jazz Ensemble, which, believe it or not, was actually funded by the city. So the city of Buffalo at one time funded a jazz band.
Yeah. Wow. So as a fan, what do you think will keep people supporting the jazz scene, and how does the AKG help with that?
Well, I'll tell you, venues like this offer, a chance for younger and younger kids to get involved. It's not like you're going down to Allentown and trying to get into a bar underage or something to hear some music. Like, there's a space here that welcomes and embraces younger audiences. And again, whether that be for the music or the art that's here.
Well, thank you for taking time with us today. I know that you're a strong supporter of this space and of music, and that's what's going to keep it going.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. That wraps up this episode of Here Here. Be sure to check out more episodes on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Buffalo is a unique music destination, and we uncover it all on Here Here. This program is produced by Buffalo Toronto Public Media for Visit Buffalo Niagara. I'm Bentley. Thanks for listening.